Sothany Downtano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Kero Kero Bonito album, Time and Place. This is the second full-length album from UK pop trio Kero Kero Bonito. It is also their Polyvinyl Records debut. The band, if you remember, made kind of a splash back in 2016 with their debut full-length album, Bonito Generation, which was one of the most fun, bubbly, and youthful pop records of the year. Pretty diverse as well, as the album incorporated elements of synth and electropop, J-pop, even hip-hop music, in a series of songs that were like these cute and heartwarming odes to growing up, moving on, moving into the next phase of your life, and adulting while trying to maintain your childlike innocence and a positive, enthusiastic outlook. Something I need to remind myself of sometimes. So I loved the album. Instantly, the trio had become a group to look out for. But then just earlier this year, the band started to tease toward new material and a new direction with their Totep EP, a little release that saw the band embarking on some indie pop and indie rock numbers that were sort of breezy. I didn't mind the overall switch in style, but I hoped that if the band were going to continue in this direction, they would do something that was a bit more bold or brought out the personality that I loved hearing so much on their debut record. Now, that EP did turn out to be a bit of a taster of things to come, because on this latest record over here, Kero Kero Bonito are very much drifting away from some of the J-pop and electropop influences that permeated nearly every single track on Bonito Generation. And that's getting swapped out with things like alt-rock and power pop. The trio are digging into their UK roots as well and delivering some twee pop, a style that actually complements Sarah Bonito's gentle voice very well. There are even some noise pop tracks and passages on this thing. However, this record is not a complete departure, as there's still quite a few synth pop numbers on this thing, plus the band's catchy songwriting and endearing lyrics are still very much here in spades. Some fans might react negatively to the change that Kero Kero Bonito bring on this new record, but I think the shift in sound is really only skin deep, because a lot of what made Bonito Generation great also holds true for Time and Place. The band are now just trying out some different musical styles, which I might add they do very well. It would be one thing if they tried twee pop and they were just garbage at it, but they're actually not. Because miraculously, this is one of the better records I've heard in a while that embraces that style. There are quite a few standout singles on this thing, like Time Today, which features a sentimental set of keyboard chords and a sequenced swinging beat, as Sarah sings longingly about how she will spend her free time that day, getting things done, putting things off, kind of being in her feelings. A track that is very much in the spirit of a typical Kero Kero Bonito song, in that it is in a way celebrating and observing the little things in life. The song Make Believe is one of the best fusions of the band's debut album sound with some of the indie pop and rock influences on that EP that dropped earlier this year. The song pretty much feels like some very fancy free indie pop, a bit of a Belle and Sebastian vibe, I would say. Some great instrumental transitions, candy-coated chords, and the lyrics on this thing all about trying to maintain your innocence, your ability to make believe, but real life kind of gets in the way. The song Only Acting I read as a very smart track about performing and being an artist, having an audience. The track has a quirky little indie pop intro, but eventually explodes into some roaring alternative rock and power pop, a bit of a Weezer vibe coming off the guitars. And there are also some really insane experimental noisy transitions on this track from one section to another, sounds that I can only begin to imagine the process of creating, and the end is like this complete sonic 15-car pileup with just noises and what sounds like maybe even samples just kind of crashing into each other. It's an absolutely freaky ending and shows that Kero Kero Bonito on this record are as experimental as they are accessible. I found many of the deep cuts on this album pretty gratifying as well. The song Sometimes is a surprise lo-fi acoustic number about how life can be pretty unfair. The song is both lovely and quaint. Also great, the glistening synth pop of the track Dear Future Self. Yet another song in the band's catalog about growing, learning, changing, and essentially coming to terms with that. Now, listen, I would hate to, in this review, just tediously go over every single song explaining what it says and does. But it's a little difficult to not give into that temptation because there is so much versatility and diversity on Time and Place. Pretty much every track sounds different, has its own personality, which I admit was a little off-putting at first, especially since the band's debut record was so clearly defined defined. It had such a distinct sound. And typically when a new group with a debut album breaks through with a new sound that's pretty recognizable, they stick to that going forward. This, however, it just does not hold true for Time and Place, as the band dabbles in some instantly recognizable noise and twee pop on tracks like FLYWAY and Outside. And while these musical styles are pretty tried and true, and Kero Kero Bonito stick very closely to the blueprints of each of them, the harmonious and fuzzy and blissful synths and guitars they work into these tracks are really bright, flavorful, fun, far from bland and generic, even if the band's intent on some of these tracks is to sound kind of easygoing. There are a few tracks in the track listing I thought were just okay, but the closest the entire album comes to delivering a dud has to be the song Dump. And the track does have some cool elements to it. I don't mind Sarah's vocals. I think the gurgling synth bass on the track is cool. The moody chords set a nice tone, but I just wish the song built up from its very meager, low-key intro just a bit more than it actually does. The song Visiting Hours sonically is a little middle of the road, and the closing song Rest Stop is almost experimental to a fault, with the instrumental at the midpoint of the song totally breaking down to the point where it essentially devolves into Sarah singing quietly against a cycling sequence drum beat with a lot of sputtering, glitching noise and static. As unpleasant as some parts of this track are, I actually really admire the risk the band took here and the left hook that they pulled, the rug they pulled out from under everybody at the very finish of this album. Overall, I love this record. I think it's really sweet. I think it's really fun. It may be a change of pace that some fans are not ready for, that they don't want, and maybe I was even feeling that way a little bit on my initial listen, but after visiting it again and again and again, I cannot deny that this record is pretty much on par with Bonito Generation, in that it features really quality songwriting, solid performances, colorful and creative production, thoughtful lyrics, sticky melody, sweet instrumentation, and it's just really cute as hell, okay? And now all of these things that have been great about KKB are being complemented with a really noisy, somewhat experimental veneer. I'm feeling a light to decent 8 on this thing. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Kero Kero Bonito, forever.